welcome back to another week of Behind the Lens. I'm Debbie Elias, film critic, creator, and host of Behind the Lens, where we go behind the lens and below the line with those movers and shakers, the film and TV makers, the producers, the directors, the writers, the actors, the cinematographers, production designers, costume designers, composers, VFX gurus, film editors, sound mixers, you name it, we talk to them. And this is it. We're in the final week before Oscars, which are next Sunday on March 2nd. So next Monday, I'll be doing some talking about the winners and the losers. Of course, the fact you're nominated, you're already a winner. And we're coming fresh off the Independent Spirit Awards, the SAG Awards. I am beyond thrilled to see Conclave win Best Ensemble at the SAG Awards tonight. So it's just, we're getting ready to wind down, counting it down till we start gearing up for another award season, the Emmys. So I've got a terrific show lined up for you today, and it's a great way to finish off Black History Month, as you're about to hear my exclusive interviews with director Julius Onah, talking about Captain America: Brave New World, as well as actor turned writer, producer, and low-budget, no-budget, micro-budget filmmaker Ella Thomas, talking her new film, No Mercy. And by the way, that's no as in K-N-O-W. Think about that. Captain America is a first for Julius, as while he's already an accomplished director with Brave New World, he joins the high-octane world of the MCU. And for Ella, No Mercy is a first for her. She ventures from acting into producing and writing as well, and acting while she's producing and writing. And we're looking at two ends of the financial spectrum with these films. Marvel versus a low-budget, no-budget, micro-budget indie. Both are worth seeing. I kid you not. Both are worth seeing. First up is my exclusive interview with Ella Thomas talking about No Mercy, a film that's rooted in faith while exploring good versus evil, immortality versus mortality, and what it means to be human and maybe a good person. Many of you are already familiar with Ella. She has years of acting experience under her belt, notably for her most recent role in Nightbitch, opposite Amy Adams. But be warned, her role in No Mercy is nothing like that in Nightbitch. To give you an idea of what the film is about, Hanok is an immortal man who is stranded on Earth and has been since 1526. So we're talking quite a few centuries here. But he's been conflicted all these centuries as to the ever-present question of his purpose. Why is he here? As he navigates through time in the modern world, he yearns to uncover the secret of his existence. There's also a brilliant but terminally ill scientist named Victor, who becomes obsessed with capturing Hanok and believes that his immortality holds the key to Victor's own salvation. His relentless pursuit jeopardizes not only Hanok, but also the safety of the woman Hanok has grown to love after a life of solitude. And as Victor closes in, Hanok must confront the powerful force that wants to exploit him and navigating the betrayal of those closest to him. In a desperate race against time, he grapples with the moral implications of his immortality, while simultaneously striving to protect the woman he cherishes, all the while still seeking answers that could either liberate him or trap him in the eternal quest for meaning in a world where life and death are intricately connected. No Mercy is directed by Perdell Richardson and co-written by Richardson, Cyrier, and Ella Thomas. It relies on a small but strong ensemble cast with Xavier Avila as Hanok, Donald Fullilove as Victor. He is fantastic as this pure evil. An evil genius scientist, shall we say. Paul Davis is standout as Arnold, who is a best friend to Hanak, and who is just like you and me. He's got a kid who's sick. He needs to pay for medical care. The bills are piling up. He can't find a job. This is what the average American is facing right now, which makes Arnold a very relatable character and also begs the question for him, what length will he go to provide for his family? Anaya Williams stars as Alicia, the woman that Hanak has fallen in love with, and Ella Thompson appears as Ariel, a rather ethereal leader, shall we say. What I love about this conversation with Ella is not only how we break down the film from her perspective as a writer and a producer, but we delve into casting and performance, including her own, and the emotional depth of the characters, along with emphasizing the importance of grounded motivation and real interpersonal dynamics. Reflecting on her collaboration with Purdell with this project, Ella also speaks to the challenges of guerrilla filmmaking, the necessary flexibility required to make this film due to funding constraints, and the support from the film's distributor, in this case, you know this is one of my favorite indie distributors, Gravitas Ventures. Something that stood out for me in our conversation, which was freewheeling fun, as you'll hear with the two of us. Ella has the best mindset in approaching filmmaking as a producer and writer, and a hands-on, get dirty, do whatever overseer after coming at it from an actor's perspective. Now, having done No Mercy, as an actor, she now understands what goes into accommodating actor demands or desires during filming and how that can screw up time and budget. In essence, it's going to make her more thoughtful in requests that she makes as an actor on a film. But overall, it makes for a very interesting interview. So sit back and take a listen to my exclusive interview with Ella Thomas talking about No Mercy. Hello, Ella.
Well, good afternoon to you, and thanks for inviting me to have a little conversation with you about the movie. I really appreciate it.
I am so thrilled, especially after watching this film. Wow.
Goodness.
I didn't know what to expect based on the brief synopsis that was in the press blast. And I got so involved in this, and throughout the entire film, all I kept thinking is, I want a series. I want a series. A television series based on this.
You are so lovely. Thank you so much. It becomes so easy for people to be critical of indie filmmakers because, you know, there are times that you understand, like, budgetary constraints and trying to put your best foot forward. But it was really important to us that people leave this film feeling, you know, empowered by this idea that we're in this together and we're just trying to march into the world with some grace and some dignity, and we're all just trying to find who we are, and it's a universal theme. So I can't tell you how much it means to me for you to have approached our little movie with such grace. Thank you.
It's so uplifting watching this. And yes, it is definitely faith. Faith-based is a big cornerstone here. But you don't shove it down anybody's throat. This is never preachy. What you're addressing here in No Mercy are really some universal questions. And the way we see it play out, and the whole idea of good versus evil, and we all see good versus evil every single day of our lives in the people and in the world around us. And watching the nuance that this is brought to life through Hanak, who is one of the most engaging characters. You cannot help but be drawn to him. And then
I think that's also because of Xavier Avila. He's a wonderful, wonderful actor, and just came at it with so much heart.
Where did you find Xavier? I mean, because he truly is, when he is on screen and his eyes, it's like he is looking into your soul when he's looking into the camera.
He's a fairly new actor. He's done some television, and I think we always talk about when you finally get the opportunity, especially in this business, what you do with it. Xavier showed up on set like this was a big budget, A-list director. He was prepared. He was open. He was flexible. He gave us all the time we needed. He didn't put any constraints, and he was just humble. I think that was one of the things that we all knew, too. We didn't know where this would go when we started. We didn't know what it would be, but we were all in it to tell a story. We've come out of the pandemic. We've come off of 2 strikes. We've come off of all the rhetoric and negativity and vitriol, and we just wanted to present a different picture, a different story that was, kind of was genre bending, sci-fi elements with faith elements, but faith in the idea that the golden rule. It's not about religion. It's just about the social contract of how we treat each other, of decency and morality, and not to be in a world where we're trying to shout each other down, even when we're coming at something from opposite viewpoint.
Absolutely. And this is where your character construct is so important here, Ella, because we have Enoch, who is good, personified. We have Victor, who is brilliantly played by Donald Philolove, who is clearly, there is evil and malevolence within this man. But then we get somebody like Arnold, who is the average us, who, good, bad, he's got flaws, but he has a good heart. And so you really give us this great spectrum of characters, and you follow it through on the character development of each of those characters. And that's something that was a wonderful surprise.
For us, when we started going through the script, because Perdell Richardson, our director, was the person who came up with the concept of the film. He and Denise started working on the structure, and they had the characters in place. And when I came on board, because my background was primarily as an actress, and I wanted to emphasize to them that no exposition. Trust that the audience will understand. The characters need to say less but feel more.
Yeah.
And that the motivation be grounded in truth. Like, that was the thing where, and everything, we can believe it as an audience member if we can find ourselves in the story, if we can find empathy for the characters. And so for me, it was important that they speak the way people speak, that we have real arguments between people, that we don't sit on a soapbox, because you also don't want to alienate people. People's faith resonates in different places. Some, their faith is based in religion. Some, their faith is based in their spirituality. But it always comes back to me of this idea of we're all, man, woman, whoever you are, we're all in search of ourselves. Everybody's trying to find their purpose. And I found that was an element that I really wanted to help flesh out in the characters.
Well, I think you definitely did, Ella, and coming at it so that so much of what we can connect with as an audience, as a viewer, is the humanity and the truth within each of these characters. Arnold is an incredible character, and Paul Davis does a great job making him just like us. The warts and all. Yes, I love my family. No, we have no money. I can't find a job. My son is sick. This is what everybody is dealing with every single day. He is so relatable. And then it pushes the button that so many people think about, what length will I go to provide for my family? to make his wife happy so she stops yelling at him about the bills, to make his son get well. So connectable, and you see the emotion come out in the performance. Similarly, the freneticism and the desperation in Victor of he wants what he wants when he wants it, he wants it now, whether it's viable or whether he should have it or not. And then Hanak, who just is so kind, so caring, so loving. And it comes through so loudly, Ella. Each of these characters, with, as you said, without exposition, it comes through in the performance and in the emotionality of each. And I think it's because you as an actor understood this and really could bring that in to let these actors play.
It is this. I'm so overwhelmed. I'm so overwhelmed by your words because, again, you know, what's different about being an actress or a writer, producer, as an actress, when if a project hits or misses, it's not on your shoulders. But as a producer, you take it on a different level. Meaning, if things don't go well, the finger points to you, which is not something that I've been used to. But I did also understand that this was a learning process for myself, and I was very humbled by the experience, and it has given me a greater appreciation for the different departments that make, you know, the collaboration that allows a film to come to life. And I feel like going forward, it shifted how I also view people that work in films, because we don't know the mental load, especially as actors. We're such a protected set that we don't fully understand that if we decide that we want our mark to be 2 feet to the right, we've just put everybody behind schedule. We're relighting because we have to relight for the other characters. There's just an inherent, you know, myopathy that goes into being an actor, even though you are part of the process. And I loved that part of the experience because I feel like people should know. I think that it will make me a more well-rounded actress in going forth on other projects, because I now have a greater understanding of the story, not just my part in the story.
But the story of making a production, the story itself that you are making, it gives you, it's very eye-opening for a lot of actors once they put on another hat. It's really interesting if their eyes are open, what they see and what they then understand, and what then makes them a better actor. Just like I firmly believe, and I've seen this many times, of course there are exceptions, where actors that step into the director's chair should never step into the director's chair, because even though their eyes have been opened, their minds are closed.
Oh, that's sad.
And it has happened. It has happened.
I think sometimes it's because it's an ego-driven project where, I haven't been given the opportunity to play this role and I really want to, so it becomes, it's a narrow road. Yeah. I knew that my job on this was always to be in service of the film. That's, however, if that means Perdell needed to be shielded, if that means my actors need to be protected, my first goal, even though this was an indie set, was to adhere to all protocols, all safety, all the same as a big budget film would be, for people to get their breaks when they need them, for us to build in a safety net, especially for our actors, because there were times where the material was very emotional.
Yeah. Very much so.
You know, we've seen what happens when we don't follow safety protocol, and I was adamant that that would not be our situation. And, you know, you only have such a skeleton crew, but there's no room for error, especially when you're doing stunts or, you know, you're dealing with props, and I love that the crew and the cast trusted me. They knew that I was going to protect them, because I always felt like if I was an actor, this is how I would want to be treated, even if I was on a smaller budget project.
Mm-hmm. It's what I love to call the low budget, no budget, micro budget film. Everyone is wearing different hats. I mean, Purdell, he's a co-writer, he's director, he's the editor, he's the DP. You're producing, co-writing. You have an acting role as Ariel, and you're the costume designer, which, by the way, the costume that you have for Ariel, that is gorgeous. But I don't see where you also need the hat safety coordinator, I think. But you have not given yourself that title.
I think because I think it fell under my purview of producer of really, you know what I mean? I'm like, oh, it's all. And it's so funny because I remember going home one night going like, oh my goodness, this is so thankless. The new meaning to first one in, last one out. I was like, oh, okay. I'm driving down the 405. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. My little one is going to be up at 6:45, and I don't know how. The beautiful part about it is, and I think you can understand this, I didn't know what I didn't know to be afraid of doing it. Just blind faith. I'm like, I'm going to put one foot in front of the other, and, we need extra clothes. I raided my closet. I raided my husband's closet. I was going every Sunday afternoon to Target to buy new sponges, and I had rolling racks in the back of my car, and craft services in the car seat, my kid's car seat. It was just carrying on. I'm like, okay, I mean, we're in this.
You have just gotten a hands-on first experience at guerrilla filmmaking.
Yeah, but the fact, the biggest thing out of all of this is the fact that whatever is at play in the universe, and I don't mean to get hokey about this, but we weren't done with post-production. And I have some splashy film coming out, so I know that put us on the radar, but Gravitas never wavered in their support of us. From day one, they just kept saying, all right, let us know, beginning September, we'll check back in. Okay, let us know. And then when we sent them the rough cut, they're like, okay, here's the deal memo. So we never had to go the route of a sales agent, and we never had to go to festivals. And so no matter what criticism may come of it, I feel like we have walked the path of the universe giving us a little tap on the shoulder saying, this is what you're all supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let you know in this manner that however you guys decide to proceed with all of this, this is the world you're supposed to be operating in. And Gravitas didn't just make us a one-genre film. They didn't make us just part of Black History Month. They got us a distribution deal and a carriage letter equal to any other film in their slate.
And Gravitas, for years, this has been one of my go-to distributors for independent filmmakers, first-time filmmakers. If they're on the festival circuit, and I will ask them all, because when I see over 1,100 films every year, and I've been doing this 43 years now, and it's like, yeah, you might contact Gravitas, because this is where your film belongs, or you might try Vertical. But Gravitas, when they come on with a film, they are on with that film. And they're not going to jerk you around. And I think Gravitas, because they're so open to genre bending and melding, I think they are a perfect home for No Mercy. You lucked out with this one. You really did, Ella.
I feel that from the bottom of my core. Bill Griffin was our absolute champion the entire time. And again, I know the alternative. I've done tons of indie films that died on the vine. And I understand, because there's a world between finishing a film and then it being deliverable that you don't find out if you haven't worked in this capacity before. Music clearances, the soundtrack, our composer, every single music cue needs to be documented, sound cues, and I learned it on the fly. my cousin came on as my post-production supervisor because she's a genius, and she organized me to within an inch of my life, and she's just like, we got this. She's like, we all have this. We all have strengths, and one by one, I had my old acting teacher's husband get us an attorney. The amount of people that did favors, the amount of things that we have on deferral, but I realized it wasn't just that they believed in the film, but they believed in our little team too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And and I feel like that's the highest compliment someone can give you, is when they believe in you enough to stand behind you or do you the favor without you having to even ask.
And that's a very important point, because there are people you can believe in the film, but if you don't believe in the people that are trying to get this film done, then there's no point. There's no point to, extending yourself, extending your services, holding out your hand and saying, here, I'm here for you. So that speaks volumes about you and Purdell in particular, the two of you, to be helming this project, that people wanted to come on board, and not just because of a script, but because they believed in you. So that speaks volumes about you and about Purdell.
Yeah, and we've been friends a really long time. We did one of our first projects together. I was an actress and he was a PA on a short film in New Orleans. And the thing that we had in common at the time, which we still do to this day, is that we love film. We love movies. We love television. We love all the artistry, the creativity that goes into it. And that has bonded us through the years as we've worked on other projects together. I've watched him hone his craft as a DP. We've just supported each other. He's probably like a brother at this point, more so than just a collaborator.
What was it that got you involved in the project to begin with? Because as you said, Purdell and Sari already had this, but then you came in. What led you into this? What attracted this one, especially once you saw this and it's like, okay, you're going to help co-write, you're going to produce. Oh yeah, there's a role for me too. Oh yeah, I'm going to do costuming. As this unfolded, what led you into this in the beginning?
We had talked about doing something. We had a couple of different scripts that were floating, but responsibilities, I have a family, I have a young son, and so we kept diverging. And this one, time-wise, worked out, where I was like, oh, I have this chunk of time right now. I didn't actually know what I was getting into. I jumped in blindly and was just like, oh, I'm going to produce, and I realized, oh, we don't have hair and makeup. Oh, we don't have costuming. And then we went through the budget, and I really thought to myself, if we take money from other areas, it's not going to look as good, because we had to have the crew we had. Mm-hmm. We didn't have one sound cue issue. We didn't have to do any of that in post. That's how good our team was.
Wow.
But the more I got involved, there's no quit. So when I saw where there was lifting to be done, I just jumped in. Again, I didn't know what it was going to require of me, but when I saw certain things where I knew that if we had extra set of hands here, it could elevate it by, staying on top. Something as simple as staying on top of hair and makeup.
Yeah.
Someone saying, like, all of those. And it was exhausting, but satisfying. I have not one moment that I go back and go, ugh. I would leave most days going, I'm so proud of us.
Oh my gosh. Now, when you came on board initially, was the character of Ariel already present in the script, or did Ariel get added in?
The character was already there, and I've always had this thing where I have said that I can't be in something that I'm producing or writing because I hadn't learned how to separate out. Mm-hmm. One time I had to do it. I saw one of the PAs run along my wall and left a big streak, and I jumped out of scene. So it's been a long time since I attempted this again, and I realized you have to have 100% trust in your team. Also, we ran out of money, so I'm like, well, I guess I can do Ariel. I was like, okay, we can save money, and I can test myself. I can test where I line up in terms of being able to separate out and not be self-conscious or cognizant of my surroundings in terms of the filmmaking team. So I learned that I can. It's a matter of building the team that you trust.
Because that's always something I find very interesting when you're wearing multiple hats. Because wearing a producer hat, you're looking at everything. You're worried about everything 24/7. As a writer, as a co-writer, it's like, the kill your darlings moments. Do we have to change this in the script? Do we have to do this? Oh, somebody wants to ad-lib. And then you're acting as well. So you have to take off the producer hat, take off the writer hat, and just look at what's on the page in front of you. And it's very difficult for people to do that. So how well do you think you have mastered the taking the hats on and off with this film?
I feel innately that I learned a great deal, and that if my performance in Ariel touches people and they connect, and it didn't seem like an actor who's distracted, then I feel like I did my job. It's always hard to gauge your own performance, but I feel that I was able to be completely present as the character. Once I sat in, once I stopped being aware of the lights and everything, and I just let it all go. So I think for myself, I was successful. I was able to truly just immerse myself in the experience of being part of that moment.
So now putting your producer hat on, putting the Ella producer hat on for a second, after working with actor Ella in No Mercy, would producer Ella hire her again on a project?
Yes. Yes. Always prepared. Actor Ella is prepared and then lets it fly and is collaborative, and producer Ella can say this about everybody, because here's the thing that most people don't know is that because of the way that we were raising money, we never knew what our next location was going to be. So our actors had to stay flexible and malleable, and we would call them 2 days before to let them know the scenes that we were going to shoot.
Wow.
And those were 12-hour days that they had to learn on the fly.
Oh my God. Wow.
So yeah, I would work with everyone again.
So what was your financing process for this one? Did you do Indiegogo, Kickstarter?
We went word of mouth. And we had some investors. And coming off of a splashier film, people were willing to jump in and invest in, even when it came to investing in getting us the sound stage, which was Heritage Studio down in Burbank.
Now
So everybody was able to contribute in some way.
Now I have to say that having seen Nightbitch and seen you in that, wow, big different character from Ariel.
Yep, I'm like, it is. I get to bounce around a lot.
I think you need to have you need to have No Mercy and Nightbitch, those two films in your reel, and people will see a great range from you automatically.
You know what's one of my favorite, and I don't know if you've had the opportunity to follow a director named Nadine Crocker, who actually is one of the reasons why I was so inspired to work as a producer and a writer on this, because her first film was a film called Continue, and she wrote it, she directed it, and she starred in it, and she did a beautiful job, and she was the director of Desperation Road.
Mm-hmm.
And when I watched her working on Desperation Road, because that's one of my favorite films, like that, being part of that cast, I felt was the first time I was like, oh, this was a role that I genuinely, when I received it, my body melted into the character. And to work with her and the way that, because she's also an actor, and I realized that the best directors do understand where actors work from.
Mm-hmm.
That and they have an approach that speaks to your heart as opposed to your head.
Yes, indeed. And that is actually, I interviewed Nadine for Desperation Road.
Oh, then you know she's amazing.
I know. And she has such a great philosophy and approach. And she does call on her acting experience to bring that into her directing. And it sees on screen, because when you can elicit in something like Desperation Road, when you can get some of those scenes between Garrett and Mel that are just so powerful, so amazing, and it's because as a director, you know when to let the actor take hold, when to step back, give them guidance, but let them take hold. I love Nadine's work. Love it. And she is just fantastic. Fantastic.
Yes.
So it's easy to see why Nadine could be a small influence on you, Ella.
Yeah, she's a real one, that one. I have a special place in my heart for her, and when I get the chance to talk about her, I do.
And Desperation Road, I love that film.
For so many reasons. Oh, it's so,
yeah.
It's a beautiful, and the book, I read the book the minute I got the audition, and I just fell in love with Michael Ferris and his writing.
Yes. Isn't that book spectacular? That book screams cinematic.
And it takes you on the journey.
Mm-hmm.
He has such a lyrical style.
Mm-hmm.
I love his writing. Because after that, I went and obviously bought 2 more books. Because I was just such a fan of his. Oh my goodness, I think I have to run in and I have to go to pickup. The time flew.
Oh my goodness. Well, it has been so lovely getting to chat with you, Ella, about No Mercy. I hope we get to talk again in the future, because this is just an absolute joy speaking with you.
You made my day. The way that you champion films, and I saw, and I read up on you, and I saw your site. The way you champion films and filmmakers and indie creators, and as well as others, and I just think that you're spectacular.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I think you're spectacular, and I can't wait. Maybe you're going to option one of Michael Ferris's books one day and make a film.
Oh, you just made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I'm like, ooh, I could do that.
I can see you doing that. Ella, thank you so much.
Thank you for making my day. This was amazing.
Oh, and hopefully we can be amazing again in the future.
We will. And I will be in touch, and I will be following you as well.
Oh, well, thank you, Ella. You have a great rest of your day.
You too. I'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye. And that was Ella Thomas discussing No Mercy, which is currently available on digital platforms. So check it out. Now, I'm going to bring out the big guns in my exclusive interview with director Julius Onah discussing Captain America, Brave New World, which has taken the world by storm. As Sam Wilson, our new Captain America, finds himself in the middle of an international incident and must discover the motive and who is behind a nefarious global plan. Isn't that always the way with the MCU? Always the way. For my money, Julius was an interesting choice to helm this one, as it marks his first big tent pole. But if you know Julius's work, such as that with Loose, you know his understanding of character and emotion, and that serves as a critical building block for Sam Wilson's Captain America and this next phase of the MCU and New Avengers. I already love Julius's work with what he did with Loose, and now to see what he has done, upping the ante and pushing himself into the action-heavy MCU, is fantastic. What I particularly appreciate, though, is with Brave New World, Julius gives us thoughtful, dramatic moments that allow us to get to know Sam as his own person and not part of an entire group of personalities, aka the Avengers. But we get to see him wrestle with his own conscience and self-worth, trying to step out of Steve Rogers' shadow. Julius is patient in his direction, be it in a heavy drama, be it in the MCU. He is patient, and he lets those characters breathe and find their footing. He does that here while building tension and celebrating action. Kramer Morgenthau's lensing, and notably the framing, is so key in this film, as is the editing that allows for Kramer's introspective shots to be held and not rushed, and all of that feeds into the character development. Also significant in this film, the personal relationship that Sam has with Carl Lumbly's Isaiah is very moving. And also to see how Bucky and Sam have grown in their friendship. That's just wonderful. And dare I say it, Bucky is almost like a little Jiminy Cricket on Sam's shoulder. I loved that Julius stayed true to himself as a filmmaker with the dramatic personal aspects of the story, and then cocooning that with the explosive razzle-dazzle action, most notably the aerial fights. And you're going to hear both Julius and I talk about it, but woohoo! Weta, the fabulous VFX team of Weta, is back with a lot of their wondrous work that plays into a lot of that razzle-dazzle action, as well as the Celestial Island, which is a significant part of the film. Now, don't expect to hear Julius and I rave about Anthony Mackie. These are givens. You know, rave about Anthony or Harrison Ford or Danny Ramirez or Giancarlo Esposito or Sebastian Stan. We really went technical with the meticulous production values, such as Ramsey Avery's incredible production design, Kramer Morgenthau's cinematography, the editing, the fabulous score by Laura Karpman, who also did the score for the Marvels, by the way, the use of negative space, strategic color schemes, fight choreography, along with how all of these elements serve the emotional growth and empathy of Sam Wilson, as well as the tension with Thaddeus Ross. And we also talk about the power and the exquisite delicacy of cherry blossoms, which are very, very key in this story. So take a listen as Julius Onah discusses Captain America, Brave New World. Well, is that you, Julius?
Yes, it is.
I can't tell you how thrilled I am to speak with you about this film.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm really excited to talk to you as well.
I have been such an admirer of your work. I love what you did with Loose. I was riveted with that film. And what thrills me with Captain America, Brave New World is that I still see you staying true to yourself as a filmmaker and a storyteller, focusing on the dramatic personal aspects of the characters and the story, and then cocooning that with explosive action. You give us thoughtful, dramatic moments that allow us to get to know Sam as his own person in an expanded platform, not part of a group of personalities. And we see him still wrestling with his own conscience and self-worth, trying to step out of Steve Rogers' shadow and make his own name. We also see concurrently Thaddeus Ross doing the same thing. This is such a wonderful character study at its heart, with this political thriller and then the action on top of it. Brilliant job, Julius. Brilliant.
Thank you so much. That's very kind of you. I really appreciate that. It was something that, in approaching the story, that I felt was a cool and interesting opportunity, and one I really wanted to lean into. And I'm also really grateful to Anthony and to Harrison for diving into it, and certainly to the team at Marvel for giving us the room to do so.
Just so well done. That was a real surprise to me, is to see the emotional resonance, the emotional tonal bandwidth really come through within the characters, and particularly with the empathy that Sam has for every situation and everybody. You really remind us, as Anthony does with his impeccable performance, of the humanity of Sam Wilson, of Captain America. He is not a super soldier. He is you and me. And that you really celebrate here, and we get to see that. So I'm really curious, as you broke this script down and you started to approach this, how did you break this out to hone in on the characters and the emotional, empathetic aspect of this story?
Well, it came from a number of different directions, and I really appreciate that question, because on a macro level, the conversation began with this movie should operate within the lane of a paranoid political thriller. When you start thinking about that, the great paranoid political thrillers are all stories of mistrust. Mm-hmm. Mistrust of institutions and mistrust of individuals who inhabit those institutions. And obviously, one of the gold standards is All the President's Men. But there's movies like adjacent to it, like The Day of the Jackal, where we started this conversation. There's movies like Point Blank, another film I love, that is a neo-noir but has elements of paranoia in the character journey in that film. So as I was looking at more and more of movies that sort of orbit the genre that I was interested in and that Marvel was interested in, we also looked at Les Samurai too. They're not necessarily the most obvious things to point to, but there's flavors, there's textures, there's tensions within each one of those stories that I thought were important. And what I loved about the idea then of leaning into that as a genre lane for the movie is it works in contrast to who Sam Wilson is as a character. Because if it's a genre about mistrust, you have a guy whose superpower is his empathy. It's his desire to want to see himself in others and to trust others' better instincts. So then you have a natural tension between character and genre that I think creates an engine for the storytelling, and certainly allowed us to have an engine that could be propulsive from a plotting standpoint, but also revelatory from a character standpoint, so that with every new piece of information that Sam learns, especially as it builds towards a big revelatory scene between him and Ross divulges the truth of where he's coming from, you are satisfying the obligations of the movie from a genre standpoint, while at the same time revealing character. So I really wanted to hone in on shaping those character journeys, seeing what was there as potential on the page, and then streamlining it so that we could have a real sense of forward movement from a genre standpoint, while always feeling like we were moving with Sam on a character journey, and also keeping him as the investigator at the center of the story, so that when every piece of new information comes out, it's Sam finding out that information, staying ahead or in lockstep with the audience, and us really feeling his emotional twists and turns as the movie arrives at its climax.
It is just so perfectly done in that regard, Julius. And it's like watching a good murder mystery, as each of the clues are coming forward, and Sam is the one discovering all of them. And you integrate beautiful, beautiful moment with Bucky, and he's almost like Jiminy Cricket on Sam's shoulder. And of course, reminding him, it's like, dude, you can do this, you can do this. And then, of course, the wonderful Carl Lumley coming in as Isaiah, which is always going to be a grounding moment and reminder to Sam of where he comes from and who he is. And I love that you have found a way to take the past, meld it with the present to set Sam on his course for the future. And we see that and feel that in their performances. And then you wrap it all in this incredible, incredible action piece. How did you, with all the emotionality and drama of the characters and the core beating heart of this film, how did you then embrace the high-octane action here? Because I got to tell you, those aerial sequences, to die for, Julius, to die for.
Thank you so much for that. It was always making sure to not lose sight of character and to make sure the action felt like an extension of character. So to your point about Carl Lumbly, who is brilliant, and the way he inhabits Isaiah automatically grounds us. That scene between Sam and Isaiah in the pool room early on in the film, and then also the scene between Sam, Isaiah, and Joaquin in the limousine. Mm-hmm. They were very important moments for me to understand where these characters were coming from, but to also see their humanity, see Isaiah's concern and care for Sam, see Isaiah let his guard down as Sam is pulling him further out into the world, and spotlighting him and the contributions that he's made historically, and see the sense of fun that the three of them have in that limo, and sort of a kind of pinch yourself moment that they are going to the White House. These are not people who maybe historically have had this sort of access and platform, and even for them it feels larger in life to be doing that. And then to get that immediately get snatched away from him. I think sometimes that's the fear for anybody coming from an outsider experience of trusting the opportunity to become an insider, that it's something that gets dangled in front of you that could easily be snatched away in an instant. And that's certainly some of the experience that Isaiah ends up having, and some of what Sam is trying to protect as well. So a lot of thought and care, and we did rehearsals as well, and there was a lot of conversation with each one of these performers to make sure that those human moments were there, and then to your point, that it would explode into the action, so you know what's at stake for Isaiah, so that big propulsive sequence when he's being chased. And, even the detail of the suit was something that was incredibly important to me as I was doing research into the history of Isaiah Bradley and the sense of the relationship he had had with his wife. I just thought, how great would it be if he was wearing the suit that they once wore to their wedding, to this event, because it's the only nice thing that he still has, right?
Yeah.
And then to have that become damaged while he was being arrested, it felt like a great opportunity to nod to his history, and again, just nod to the grounding and simplicity of who this man is. I'm not coming from a particularly wealthy background myself, so I always imagine if I'm walking in a situation like that, I'm probably taking the best thing that I have and putting it on. But to make it really personal to him, Isaiah was really important, and then I felt that's the way to make an action sequence not just be an action sequence, but make that arrest and what happens at the culmination of it really feel like a character moment and an emotional moment as well, too.
And you definitely succeed, and I'm glad you brought up the costume, and not just what Isaiah wears, but also the newer, updated design of Cap's costuming, the wonderful contribution of Shuri and the Wakandans with the really cool wings now. God bless Vibranium. But this plays into Ramsey Avery's production design, which is really, it is just impeccable, especially when we take a look at Camp Echo and how that design, that lab, all of that plays into the visual grammar that Kramer then delivers to you. Similarly with the White House and that great contrast of Thaddeus and the cherry blossoms in the White House and what we're going to see unfold in that scene, the contrast there, the emotional contrast. But talk to me about the meticulous nature of the production design and Kramer's cinematography. The camera work, the lighting, lensing is superlative. The visual grammar is so outstanding, and what it allows us to see, which doesn't often happen, the visual tonal bandwidth is seamlessly married to the emotional tonal bandwidth of the film. So talk to me about, this is just magnificent. Talk to me about this blend here.
I could talk to you. How much time do you have?
I have all the time in the world for you.
Hours and hours about it. Ramsey Avery is somebody I'm a massive fan of. We had sort of orbited each other for a very long time. And the minute I got this job, he was at the top of the list of who I wanted to collaborate with as a production designer. And I'm grateful that Marvel gave us the opportunity to work together. And we immediately started talking about the sense of the genre lane. Thinking back to movies again like Point Blank, movies like Les Samurai, there's a coolness and a crispness to the images and the locations, a sharpness, the the lines, brutalist structures in some of these images. So those were all things that I really wanted this very crisp, controlled visual design, and Ramsey did a brilliant job doing that. And then the next step was, how do you light that in a way that leans into the light and the dark, the shadows of it all, the chiaroscuro lighting scheme. So there was a real great hand-in-hand between Ramsey and between Kramer. And then shot selection and camera selection and lenses. We used C-Series Panavision lenses, the same lenses that, were archetypal of those movies from the 70s, in particular the Bakula trilogy of the Parallax View and Clute and All the President's Men. But taking that visual aesthetic and employing it for this movie, I felt was essential to what we were talking about, of this atmosphere of mistrust and this notion of being in a paranoid political thriller. But the other wrinkle to it was, as much as I wanted to nod to those films, I did also want a sense of color to be part of the palette of this film, a vibrancy of color, so that later on in the filmmaking, when we start to get into the more fantastic elements of it, you could still have this seamless transition to them. So the one thing I did was I said, let's keep the images saturated from color and whatnot, sets and costumes, and the great work that Gersha Phillips did, and the great set decoration by Rosemary Brandenburg. But I asked to remove one color from the palette, which was red. So I love how you've seen the through line between, let's call it the White House, to over at Camp Echo 1, and then later on in the film. It's actually a very vibrant color in terms of saturation in the movie. What you just don't have is red. So it makes it feel like it's a cooler, maybe slightly desaturated film when it's not. But then red is very much so employed tactically. There's still the red that you feel in the carpet, in the entrance hall of the Oval Office. There's red lights that are employed very strategically by Kramer in the lighting in Camp Echo 1. All of that was to create the sensation that the temperature of the movie is increasing as we are approaching the revelation of Ross's history and his eventual transformation to Red Hulk, so that when Red Hulk enters the movie, he feels like a real intrusion. But then that also meant we had to work hand in hand with Gersha and her costumes to make sure there was no red in it, with Rosemary Brandenburg and her set dressing to make sure that there was no red in it, or that when there was red, it was very carefully employed. Likewise with props. So you look at Ross Bobbitt's work as well. It's equally controlled. And when you see red in the White House, it's that carpet, but it's also the red lollipop that Ross is using as a little bit of a tease as to where his journey is going. So that's one facet of it, and I can also get into the cherry blossoms because that's another facet, but I feel like I've just said a lot.
Talk to me about the cherry blossoms, because that is another one of these brilliant contrasts that speak to the softer side of Ross and his yearning to be with his daughter and to reconcile with her. Plus pink, it's a nice blend between red, toned down with white, so your color construct comes into play there. But it's the delicacy and the humanity and the beauty that we see in those moments with the cherry blossoms. But please talk to me about the cherry blossoms, because they are exquisite.
Thank you. And they were a tremendous amount of work. And yet again, I have to credit Ramsey for how he helped me incorporate it over the course of the film. The cherry blossoms were personal. First of all, I grew up in the D.C. area, and it was just something that when I first moved to D.C. at 10 years old, that always stuck with me as an image. And I wanted it to be something that then creates a connective tissue between Ross and Betty. So early on in the movie, there's a scene where Ross basically describes his entire fate in this movie in that scene. You see him framed by two cherry blossom trees, and then he recites a line from Walt Whitman that Whitman had said, keep your face always toward the sunshine, and the shadows will fall behind you. And I love this idea of subtly teasing exactly where this character was going to be going in a way that maybe most people might not notice. But then the cherry blossoms haunt Ross over the course of the movie. You see them in the ikebana plants in the doorway of in the White House when he's greeting the Japanese Prime Minister. You see them again with the Japanese Prime Minister in Tokyo. It was this idea that the thing that he's yearning for is always looming, always around him. And I like that it could operate on two levels, his personal connection with Betty, but also this idea that the cherry blossoms that we have in Washington, D.C. were a gift in 1912 from the Prime Minister, from the Ambassador of Japan, and also the Mayor of Tokyo. So there was a connective tissue there. And then at the end of the film, Sam, overhearing what, and really paying attention, right? Not just hearing, but really listening to what Ross is saying when they're with each other in the wardroom, and he talks about wanting to be able to walk with his daughter again at the cherry blossom. Sam's emotional intelligence comes in, and that's where that empathy as a superpower is so important. So he takes Ross back to the site of where he once connected with his daughter, to the thing that he's yearning, and then by the end, when he breaks through to Ross, that line from Whitman comes to life. He's holding a cherry blossom. He's looking to the sunlight, and we see in his shadow him turning back to the man that he truly wants to be, and also taking responsibility for his past. And it's in the taking responsibility for his past that he ultimately gets reconnected to his daughter. So that's a place where it's a combination of the work being done by Ramsey to help me. It's the work being done by our incredible visual effects team, Dan Cox and Sydney at Weta. And then, of course, the performances of the actors to bring all that together.
Just absolutely brilliant. Briefly, another thing, talking about what Kramer did and what happens with his work, one of the very, very cool things with Echo One that you and Kramer make great use of is negative space, which there's some red in Echo One, but the negative space really helps. That is like our big punch that really heightens the thriller aspect of what's about to really unfold and the explosive information. And I just love that design, that grammar aspect that the two of you put together.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, and it's something utilized over the course of the film in two ways. I love the idea of leaning into negative space just visually, but also to create a sense of being off kilter, not being quite steady, right? Both the way the actors are positioned in the frame, but also that it's a visual language that I think, especially in this kind of big, broad, populist movie that's not always employed. And then the negative space was also about creating lots of headroom to create this sensation of pressure on our performers and feel the weight that Sam especially is under. So all that was very, very deliberately done, again, to lean into genre, but then to use camera to emphasize the emotional journey of our hero, Sam.
Absolutely. And of course, this all... wrapping into all of this, of course, is the incredible stunt coordination, the fight coordination, the choreography is amazing, particularly when we look at some of these sets, because there is not a lot of room to navigate. So precision is the operative word. Similarly, inside vehicles, even we've got action happening, but primarily when we get into somewhere like Echo One, the lab room itself, the hallways, there's not a lot of room to navigate. So your stunt work, the fight choreography is outstanding. Outstanding.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this was a case where I'm so fortunate to those teams, Joey Box and Cameron Early, who were stunt and our fight coordinators, and they really embraced what I was going for with this film, which was to work in these tight, cramped environments and lean into the reality of how this action should work, while also not deviating from the larger visual language of the film. I didn't want it to sort of, and I mean this very respectfully, but I didn't want it to sort of lean into what I think are some of the conventions of, well, let's just shake the camera and do handheld and whatnot to orchestrate a fighting sequence. I wanted it to be deliberate and precise, as precise as what we were doing in our dramatic scenes. So that meant taking away something that at times can be a tool for these guys to either smooth over what a performer might not be able to do for whether safety reasons, or you're using an actor who might not be able to accomplish a certain thing, so you can maybe hide some of the choreography. But I just think our stunt performers and our actors do so much work and so much brilliant work to make this stuff feel propulsive and energetic. I didn't want to hide it. I wanted to find a way to really lean into the reality of them being in those spaces and make it not feel like all of a sudden This is the action part of the movie.
Yeah.
This is the drama part of the movie. This is the VFX part of the movie. So the same discipline I asked of our stunt choreographers and fight coordinators was also a discipline I asked of the visual effects supervisors for the big flight scene you were talking about, to always be utilizing the same camera language, always be embracing the same set of limitations to create a sense of reality. But it took a lot of work to design those, especially in those cramped spaces in Camp Echo 1, and even the hallway sequence earlier on in the movie in the chapel, in the church in Mexico. And I'm really, really grateful and proud of the results of what they accomplished across the board.
Yeah, it's wonderful. But now with all this precision and with these confined quarters and the tone that you've got going and the pace that you have going, your editing is critical here. How challenging was the editing process on this film, Julius?
It was very challenging, and we had two incredible editors, in Matthew Schmidt, who had worked on previous Captain America and Avengers films, and Madeline Gavin, who I'd worked with on Loose. And it took both of them bringing their points of view and their skill sets to this. Madeline and I had a real shorthand, especially when it came to certain character-driven scenes, that she was really able to help me quickly get through creating a shape for them. And Matt also had a great grasp of the characters and what I wanted to do specifically with this film, but also a historical knowledge coming from previous caps of where Sam was coming from, and, you know, versions of Ross that were played by Bill Hurt. So having, you know, somebody who I worked with intimately in the past, but somebody who also had a real sensitivity to where these characters were coming from was fantastic. And then again, from an action standpoint, Matt was able to really, really help us shape this in a way that felt consistent with the high caliber one expects from the MCU. But Madeline was also shaping this in a way that helped really keep in mind the character stuff that I wanted to do. So it was a great tandem and opportunity to be able to work with them on this movie. And it was very challenging at the end because we had to make sure that things cohered from both an action and a character standpoint, especially when you're doing a sequence like the one at the end with Red Hulk, where, you know, sometimes there's no actor there. Sometimes you're cutting this together, you know, with a proxy for the Red Hulk. Sometimes Mackie is interacting, you know, with a stunt double. So you're taking all these bits of raw material, and then you're getting bits of post-viz from Weta and trying to make sure that you're landing the emotional moments and the turns and, you know, the exact precision of when a cherry blossom, you know, hits somebody's hand. It's a lot, but editorially the team did such a great job facilitating all the things that needed to come in, music, VFX, etc., and never losing track of our characters.
Well, I have to say I'm thrilled to see Weta back on this one. I love the guys at Weta. And seeing the Celestial Island and, of course, the fingers coming up through the sea, which is brought right in from what they gave us in Eternals. So that was very exciting to see that. The VFX is very important. And then also the score. And I'm really curious what you were looking for from Laura, because she, of course, she composed the score for the Marvels. I'm curious what you were looking for musically that would capture the emotionality, the grounding, the humanity of this story, and the excitement and flair that we expect in an action MCU film.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, authenticity is what I was looking for, and authenticity across the board. It just needed to feel and sound authentic to Sam. So one of the first things I asked of her was to come up with something thematic for Sam that you hear actually early on in the movie. You hear during that big set piece at Celestial Island, especially when we're arriving at the climax of that. And that, to me, felt like a way to really give him a sense of the hero's theme. But this was, and Laura did a brilliant job. It was a very difficult ask. How do you satisfy what needs to happen from a heroic thematic standpoint, but also make sure that that lives in the same world as a paranoid political thriller? So, you know, I had her look at everything from the score of the great, Rainer Werner Fassbender miniseries, World on a Wire, that was another one of the visual influences for this film, that had a very kinetic electronic sound to it, but at the same time, look at the boisterous, energetic, scores of Lalo Schifrin as well from that era that had that sense of period sort of political thriller, Mission Impossible-esque sound to it. So it was really a combining of a number of different elements to create something that I thought would satisfy everything that we needed, but the real bedrock of it was having something that felt authentically like a Sam theme that could then take on different flavors, where we feel a big heroic version of it during an action sequence, and then we feel a very subtle emotional version of it, like in that scene between Sam and Joaquin towards the end of the film in the hospital.
The instrumentation picks up on all of that. So I think the instrumentality of the composition is just brilliant and allows that motif to really play so well at multiple moments, almost like a Bernard Herrmann would have done with a score, or a Max Steiner.
Yeah.
And I definitely...
Bernard certainly came up too.
Yeah. And you got Schifrin in there, and of course, one of the seminal sounds of that era. Now, I've got one last question for you, Julius. I'm really curious, because the massive undertaking of a Marvel film in and of itself, and this, you're really kicking off the next sequence in the MCU. What did you learn about yourself as a filmmaker in making Captain America: Brave New World that you can now take forward into your future film projects?
I learned that, and it's something I knew, but this only reinforced it further, how much I love the collaborative process, how much I love working with a great team of people and getting them all on the same page on a vision and then empowering them to go execute. So whether it was my conversations with Ramsey and Kramer, or my conversations with Madeline and Matt, or my conversations with Laura and Alessandro and Bill from VFX, and each of our vendors, Dan and Weta, I love getting together a group of exceptionally talented people and putting them on a mission to create something that feels like one cohesive whole. And it's something that I look forward to leaning into even more on anything I do going forward.
I, for one, cannot wait to see what you give us next. I hope you come back to the MCU and the world of Captain America. This has just been... I so love this film, Julius. I cannot tell you, because of all of the elements that you have brought to life here and married seamlessly. Job just so well done.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. This has been perhaps my favorite conversation, Debbie. Not to, slight anybody, but I really have enjoyed how thoughtful and considered you've been with the movie. I think you and Mike Muse, just two amazing conversations, and I appreciate how generous you've been in talking about the film.
Oh my God, you have been even more generous, Julius. I can't thank you enough, and I hope we get to chat again in the future.
Me too. I would really enjoy that.
Julius, thank you so much, and you go have a great rest of your week.
Okay, thank you. Take care.
And that was Julius Onah, director Julius Onah, talking about his own Brave New World, directing in the MCU, as we dug into the mechanics of Captain America: Brave New World. And as I'm sure you all know, unless you've been under a rock at the bottom of the Marianas Trench or something, or out soaring around with Captain Marvel, or Guardians of the Galaxy in some unknown galaxy, Captain America: Brave New World is playing in theaters around the globe right now. Now, that is all the time we have today. Next week, I'll be live in the Adrenaline Radio studios with director Tiffany Kim Stevens joining me live, no pre-record, live, to talk about her new film, Trigger Happy. So, until then, I'm Debbie Elias. This is Behind the Lens.